No, it's already done, it just needs to be final approved.
Well, she likes it to write an ordinance.
I do like to write it ordinance, yeah. Nothing is weird well.
Did you get that 100 yards?
Oh.
Bad to rise.
Yeah.
Jill, Keith, how are you?
Good, good.
That's fine. No Richard at all surgery, huh?
Yes.
I think he's playing hooky in Mexico.
That's one place you don't want oral surgery.
That's what I said.
You need this or you have it?
Nothing
I
against
have
nothing.
Okay.
Get some business.
He said it was costing $15 and he got 2 shots of tequila.
I mean, you also want to hit 9 o'clock then?
Yep.
All right.
You need to pay. You don't have it.
Do you have enough?
I have more than jar. And just look at the right, Steve. Big box of crayons when you just want to color.
All right, you all set? Derek, you all set?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning and welcome
Hold
to...
on, I gotta unmute.
Oh, I apologize.
There you go.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the November 2nd Trinity County Board of Supervisors meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will have public comment before we get into the board meeting. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be productive of matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Emma, is there anybody on Zoom with public comment?
I have no raised hands and no new chats.
All right. Is
There-
there anybody here in the boardroom? Public comment?
How about to the podium, please?
Go ahead.
Terry Mines, Junction City. Today I came more or less to explain the state of the cannabis in California. The market has crashed completely. I know there was a meeting over a week ago with my attorneys and stuff, and Keith and Dan showed up thinking someone might want to rob my distribution facility with a gun. This stuff's free, people. Nobody's even harvesting it. It's dying in their yards. There's no reason to even harvest it. The market is collapsed. I think you might want to get in tune with what's actually happening in the cannabis market. More likely they're going to come rob you guys at your house than they would anybody for cannabis right now in the state of California. It's collapsed, you guys. You can look this up. I'm not making up any stories. One of the positives of this is my personal company is #1 in the state of California for cannabis concentrate sales. This is my box. That's what I do. I actually am crushing it. I could have hired at least 100 people by now if the county had helped me. Obviously, your job as supervisors is to try and bring economic viability to this community. You can look on this website, headset.com, and look up what I'm telling you. My brand is called Hash and Flowers, H-A-F, and I think this week I'm #2, last week I was #1. There's only 2 other companies on that list, and they're both multi-billion-dollar companies. I actually could absolutely do wonderful things in this community, socially and responsibly and economically, legally. I'm proving it. This county is #1 in the whole state of California, which is #1 in the world, by the way. So I'm not sure why everybody is not focusing on promoting this and promoting what's going on in this community and why there's such a battle here, but I think very responsibly, all of you have a responsibility to do what's best for this community. That's #1. And so I think you should probably really think about what you're doing and what you're getting into here, because I'm looking to relocate. I need to go bigger. It's one of the things Keith told me a long time ago is if you're successful, you're gonna need a lot of acreage, and I need acreage. And I'm not talking 1, I need 10. I would have way rather never had to grow any more. I'd rather have 40 other farms produce that product here and supply my company. I think that's what this was all about when we set this up. But you guys have really sabotaged my distribution facility down in Douglas City, and I don't know why. All I do is store fresh frozen cannabis there. I don't do the product there. So there's absolutely nothing to steal. There's no danger, and it's actually an extremely positive thing for this community. I am out shopping to move right now. You're on limited time.
Thanks for your comments. Any other public comment from the board chambers?
Good morning, my name is Jack Nordland, and Weaverville. We made a request that issues related to the COVID emergency be removed from the consent calendar. I think we did that by letter May 4th, 2020. I couldn't get into the meeting the next day because I didn't realize that it was virtual, and I'm not very good with the computers and such. And by the time I got a phone call in, you'd already passed the issue, so I never got to address it. And then I saw that the emergency continues to be included in the consent calendar. It's my understanding that issues that are put on the consent calendar are non-controversial. Well, I don't know how you could say issues related to the so-called emergency, now that's existed for a year and a half. I mean, you can't be serious that we're having an emergency for this long. And you can't be serious that this is a non-controversial issue. There are 3 new board members who aren't here and weren't on the board in May 2020, so maybe we'll get my wife and I'll get a different answer this time. Hopefully you'll pull it from the consent calendar, put it on the regular agenda, and allow people to come in and speak about it. I mean, this is the issue of the ages, what's going on now. Mandatory vaccines and experimental vaccines that are probably not even vaccines. Are we going to mandate that children get this in our schools? Now, I know it's the public health that's running things here, I guess, with respect to, but you have a role to play. And this, I mean, you're stifling debate. And I've heard that it's the funding. You have to do this because of state funding, and you'll lose funding. Well, if it's a question of liberty versus security, you should at least have town meetings with your constituents to ask what their opinion is. Maybe we would forego the money. Isn't that the problem? It's always about the money. There are some things that are more important than money. And your schools are going to be affected. Your tax, your funding from that is going to decrease if you mandate vaccinating children. They're going to flee from the school. If you make the employees at the hospital get vaccinated, they're not going to have a hospital. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment.
I see no other public comment from the room. We have no hands raised and no new chat.
Stick around, Jack.
All right, with that, we'll close public comment. And we're going to go into presentations. Board of Supervisors, item 1.1, adopt a proclamation of appreciation which recognizes the District 1 Planning Commissioner Mike McHugh for his service on the Planning Commission, no fiscal impact. Supervisor Groves.
Is Mike on the Zoom?
Yes.
I am here.
Good morning, Mike. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. So I'll read the proclamation. Whereas Commissioner McHugh joined the commission at a tumultuous time in Trinity County, and whereas Commissioner McHugh's strong professional background, including the architect of the Trinity County land use document, was extremely beneficial to the Planning Commission and the county as a whole. And whereas Commissioner McHugh's strong history of community service, which is evident through his long commitment to the Trinity Center Fire Department. And whereas Commissioner McHugh's strong work ethic and his drive to learn led him to seek out planning knowledge from many sources inside and outside the county, allowing him to become accomplished in planning law and meeting etiquette. And whereas Commissioner McHugh's professionalism and demeanor brought a calming effect to the contentious commission meetings. And whereas Commissioner McHugh's resolve and commitment helped lead the commission to accomplish an enormous amount of work during his tenure. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Trinity want to thank Commissioner McHugh for his exceptional performance on the Planning Commission and express our gratitude on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, the citizens of District 1 and the county as a whole. Be it further proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors wish Commissioner McHugh the best in his future adventures. Can I get a second?
I would like to second.
Okay.
Do it loudly.
I second that.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Cox. Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Yes.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
Mike, I just want to thank you, and you're as good as commissioner as I could have ever hoped for, and we're sad that you're not here. I believe years ago you got on to participate in part of the general plan, and so the torch, Dan's laughing also, the torch will be passed on to the next, but I can't thank you enough, and from our district and from me personally.
Thank you, Supervisor Groves. I would just like to express my appreciation to the board for their confidence in appointing me to the commission 5 years ago, and to Supervisor Groves in particular for nominating me and supporting me as a commissioner all these years. It's been a privilege to serve the county, the district. I hope I did a little bit of good, and I look forward to the work that you're going to be doing on the general plan. It's true that I told Supervisor Groves when I joined the commission that I was looking forward to working on the general plan update, and 5 years into it with 5 years to go, I'm going to pass that torch on and fully support whoever replaces me and the rest of the commission in any way I can, and the board. And I wish you all the best of luck with that project, and to the citizens of the county and the board and the commission going forward, my best wishes.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. With that, we will move on to Trinity County Transportation Commission, item 1.2.
I was hoping to say some words if Mike's still on the line. Mike, you still there?
I am.
This is Kim. Good morning. I just wanted to also, I know it's a presentation, not public comment, but just jump in to say it was such a pleasure to serve with Mike, and amazing planning commissioner. I've served with many planning commissioners and supported planning commissions for a number of years, and his leadership, his understanding of the process, his seeking solutions, even those that were outside of the box. He always was just set a wonderful example, and we now have a fairly new planning commission, pretty green members that are working hard, a lot of potential there, but they will definitely miss Mike's expertise and guidance in the process, and just thank you, Mike, for everything, and best wishes. It was a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Kim. I would return the sentiment. It was a pleasure working with you as well, and best wishes to you in your future.
All right. Any additional comments?
I think we're good.
All right. Next item, Trinity County Transportation Commission 1.2, receive a presentation from Caltrans District 2 staff regarding the Clean California program, no fiscal impact. Amanda, are they on the Zoom?
Actually, I'm not sure who's presenting this one.
Okay.
Hi, this is Megan Benham. I'll be presenting for Caltrans District 2 today. Perfect.
All right, Megan, the floor is yours.
All right, so we have a new program called Clean California. It's an exciting new opportunity for us, and I am the new Clean California District Director for District 2. I'm sorry, District Coordinator for District 2. So any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to me on Clean California. Clean California is, like I said, is a new opportunity. One thing that is drastically different with Clean California is rather than using transportation dollars, we are using general fund dollars. So this gives us the opportunity to handle new projects that we traditionally in the past could not. So it's a nice new funding mechanism. There's 4 main elements with Clean California. There's a litter abatement portion, engagement with communities, trying to get education out on the impacts of litter. There's an enhancement of our infrastructure. That's done through some beautification projects conducted by the state, as well as a local grant program opportunity. If you haven't already checked out the local grant program, I highly encourage it. We've shared some information. If more information needs to be shared, please let me know. But it's a great opportunity. We have $296 million statewide available for the local grant. The great thing about this program is the local match component can be anyone from 0 to 50%, and the max amount for the projects is $5 million. So it is a great opportunity for some beautification projects, some projects with artwork, or prevention on litter. We are looking at some project potentials with Clean California within Trinity County. Some of the discussions have been around gateway monuments along 299. It's still very preliminary, so we're hoping to see some projects there. But it is a new program, a lot of changes. It is a tight time frame on projects. Everything does need to be completed by June 30th, 2023 for both the state enhancements as well as the local grant program. There is also a workshop coming up on November 18th from 10 to 12 for that local grant program. All right, do I have any questions?
I have a question. This is Supervisor Brown. Can this be used for also like planting other native species along the highway for beautification or roadside resiliency?
Yeah, so it can include landscaping. Native plants are definitely desired, as well as hardscaping and drought-resistant plants.
All right, thank you, Megan. Are there any additional questions from the board? Oh.
I do have one more question. When we're talking about litter abatement, one of the issues we have in Trinity County is abandoned vehicles. Is there going to be funding to remove abandoned vehicles from our highways?
So it hasn't been discussed abandoned vehicles specifically, but that's something I could definitely discuss a little bit further and find out more information from headquarters. Part of the program involves free dump days. So currently we're looking at different areas within our district that would be great areas to do these free dump days in order to get litter off of the highway. I can definitely look into the abandoned vehicle piece and see if that's something that could be under that portion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for your time, Megan. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Oh, how do we find out about the location of that meeting for November 18th?
It is on the Clean California website, so it's Clean California .dot.ca.gov. I can also share that information as well. Who should I send that to?
If you send that email to clerkoftheboard@trinitycounty.org, we can get that sent out to all of the supervisors.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, thanks again, Megan. All right, our next item is Veteran Services. Item 1.3, receive an update on the Veteran Services Program and adopt a proclamation designating November 2021 as National Veterans and Military Families Month. No fiscal impact. Liz?
Good morning, Chairman Brown, members of the board. I am here, Liz Hamilton, Health and Human Services Director. I'm here to present on behalf of Jennifer Dobbs, our Trinity County Veteran Service Officer, to provide you with program report. December will mark the end of her second year serving the veterans of Trinity County and as an executive member of the Health and Human Services team. Jennifer came to us with a strong education and military tenure, having received multiple awards during her 12 years with the United States Army. She specialized in integrated systems, improvement services, counterintelligence, and human intelligence, including a tour in Iraq. She continues to serve our country as a member of the Oregon Air National Guard, and we look forward to welcoming her back as she is currently mobilized and coming home soon. So I will read from her. As an Army veteran and current member of the Oregon Air National Guard, I understand the challenges and sacrifices that come with service in the armed forces. I recently returned from mobilization and brought home exactly how difficult a service member's absence can be on family. It has made me intimately aware of how important community support is to the family of a deployed or mobilized service member. I heartily support this proclamation and will strive to implement it in my interactions with veterans and their families. I have once again been greatly assisted in my mission by the leadership and staff of Health and Human Services, Director Liz Hamilton and Deputy Director Mike Catoni, the Veterans Foreign Wars Post in Weaverville and Hayfork, the Trinity Journal, and patriotic members of the community and county government. There are an estimated 1,250 veterans living in Trinity County. They have contributed to the community in many ways, including their roles as law enforcement, business owners, county government personnel, volunteers, religious leaders, teachers, school administrators, and more. Though their needs are many, few ask for assistance on their own. Much of my work is dependent upon concerned friends, family, and coworkers who alert me to their situations. During fiscal year 2021, I was able to interact with 68 veterans or family members, including 24 referrals from Health and Human Services, leading to 10 VA healthcare grants, 12 disability claims initiated or reopened, 3 applications for family caregiver program, 1 college fee waiver, and 2 burial reimbursements. That translates to recurring monthly payments totaling $9,403, one-time lump sum payments totaling $32,000, and $2,600 per month plus health insurance for the spouse of a severely disabled veteran and 1 dependent whose tuition is being waived by California Public University. Several disability claims are still awaiting adjudication, while many more are currently awaiting documents from the National Archives or pending action by the veteran. During fiscal year 2021, my program received $27,983 in state aid. It is more than expected due to CalVet's decision to conduct our quarterly conference in an online format. The state legislature recently increased the amount of funds allocated to subvention, but no decision has been made on how that money will be distributed. This summer, I was awarded a grant for a portable printer, scanner, and copier. Although still awaiting the equipment, I am confident it will assist me in my outreach activities. I have conducted numerous home visits to elderly and housebound veterans and surviving spouses. The portable printer will allow me to file claims in fewer visits and without the need for internet access. I participated in 2 fairs during fiscal year 2021 and will continue to seek those opportunities. I was able to virtually attend the HRN Health and Wellness Fair, creating a short video highlighting what benefits are available to veterans and their dependents. I also staffed a table at the Probation Resource Fair. Fiscal year 2022 will bring some exciting challenges. My newly completed mobile office will help me visit veterans who live in the more rural areas of Trinity County. I was contacted by the UROC Tribal Court Veterans Wellness Coordinator to help establish an outreach program for Native American veterans. I've been in contact with the Kolbeck Deputy Secretary for Minority and Underrepresented Veterans and hope to begin developing a successful program in the next year. I'm still scanning old paper files in the state VetPro database in order to ensure compliance with HIPAA regulations and better tracking of claims and contacts. I track and report to the state each veteran contact in every outreach event. I have mandatory trainings every quarter and spend numerous hours researching Board of Veterans Appeals and Veteran Appeals court opinions, recent and pending legislation, as well as medical conditions associated with toxic exposures unique to veterans in order to increase their chances of having their claims granted. I have obtained accreditation with Disabled American Veterans and am continuing to deliver policies and procedure manuals. There are many proud veterans in this county, and they have a variety of needs. The most pressing are access to mental health, in-home assistance, and medical care. The Reading VA HUD BASH is now able to use their vouchers in Trinity County, and Nation's Finest has indicated they have expanded their services. Hopefully, this will alleviate some of those problems. The recent fires have brought to light the need for a list of veterans who may require assistance in the event they are evacuated. I've been in contact with some of those veterans in the past for their support, or for support from the VFW and American Legion Post in Trinity County to identify potential candidates. That's the end of her report. And I'm proud that she is the first in the state to conduct home visiting. I'm really proud that she's been able to get out in our community in that way. So on behalf of our County Veteran Service Officer, the Health and Human Services Agency, and the public, I would like to thank the board for your recognition of veterans and their families throughout Trinity County in adopting this proclamation that designates November 2021 as National Veterans and Military's Family Month. I'd also like to thank Supervisor Cox and the board for recent endorsement of the placement of signs on the state highway and county borders honoring veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional comments from the board? All right.
Can we get a motion on the proclamation, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Frazier. Supervisor Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll go into the consent calendar. These items include routine, non-controversial matters and will be acted upon the board by one roll call motion. If a member of the public has any questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately. Are there items that are wishing to be pulled from the board?
I would go ahead in honor of the public request to pull 2.4.
All right. Any additional, any members of the public?
I guess I spoke prematurely, but
It's
just
okay.
my comments and apply them now.
All right, so we have 2.4 pulled, unless there's any others. Is there any motion on the balance of the items?
I move to accept the consent calendar minus item 2.4.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Frazier. Supervisor Frazier, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves,
Aye.
Supervisor Cox,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to item 2.4, adopt a resolution which confirms the continuance of a local health emergency in the county of Trinity due to the novel coronavirus known as COVID-19, no fiscal impact. And I'm not sure.
Yes.
Richard, we have this item.
So I guess my first question, are you prepared to answer all the questions that was brought up today? So the questions from the public, so the questions were about mandates, the role of the counties in school mandates and hospital mandates, and what exactly this order has for impact for the county, or do you need some more time or to have some other people in?
And thank you, Supervisor. I would like to be able to pull in our public health branch director and our public health officer and county council to help give a quality answer. Now, I can give a basic answer today, but there's layers and it's complicated. I'd like to say, I appreciate the public's comment. I think that is a perspective shared by a large portion of our community. I think that there's also a counter perspective that is also shared by a large part of our community. Now, given that we still are in a federal declared state of emergency, a state declared emergency, and our request that we continue for a local emergency, it does give us access to funding, which is needed for persons that do want to make the choice to get vaccines, and allows us to fund nursing staff that comes into our community from the state. It allows us to have access to those vaccines and a plethora of other items that are imperative that we do have for the balance of the community that might have a different opinion that was expressed this morning. So with that, I would ask that the board continue to approve this. I am happy to bring this back as an agenda item with further exploration, further conversation. We do have an epidemiologist on contracted staff right now that could provide data for the board. And I would defer further comment maybe to county council at this time.
Chair, if you'd like me to respond, there's not much I would add to what Director Hamilton said. We're currently still in a state and federal emergency. Based on this, funding is contingent on us having a local declaration of emergency. There are significant programs that are being offered to our community that do require this to continue. And if we look at our numbers, we still have enough numbers to qualify for it from a legal perspective. It's absolutely appropriate to continue forward from that perspective. It will expire when the emergency is over or when the board decides to discontinue it. But again, at this time, to do that would jeopardize potential funding sources and resources that are available, particularly on the hospital level, but also in terms of vaccination and education and support.
So my question to either council or Ms. Hamilton is are 2 weeks going to matter, or is this going to be up at this point? And or if it is going to be up within this 2 weeks, can we then look at agendizing it for 2 weeks from now, even though we're in emergency?
I would have to check with the clerk of the board. It is required to be reauthorized every 60 days. I'm anticipating this was put on at that period of time. So again, if we don't reauthorize at this time, it would expire. But again, I would have to check with the clerk.
The last time this item was brought forward was October 5th. So it would expire November 5th, approximately. So it was brought back today. It will have to be brought back again November 16th because of the way days play out before the end of the month. So it was on the schedule to be brought back again at the next board meeting regardless. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out if I need to know why it's coming back on the 16th or not, but since...
Because we're not going to have a meeting later in the month.
It would expire, if we brought it back today, November 2nd, it would expire December 2nd, and we don't meet again in December until the 21st. And so it would expire before that meeting.
It's a
30 days?
30-day renewal.
Oh,
It's 30 days, I apologize, yes.
Okay, that's where I was confused.
Sorry.
All right, so I guess my ask to the board or the chair is that we direct staff to come back with a presentation, and knowing that questions were asked and to be able to answer those, and then have the public be able to ask questions at that time.
Are you going to put that in a motion?
I don't think we have to.
We need public comment first.
Okay, and then,
But we don't have to move on. That could be direction, because we're going to vote on this today.
yeah.
And then asking for directions from council or from
Asking staff to bring
Jeremy
it
to
back.
count.
on the,
I've elevated you to council, so from the chair to do the direction.
No, I don't have any objections to that.
Is the board ready for public comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item from within the room?
I think it's really important that somehow the public be notified. If you're going to pull it out of the consent calendar and have a hearing on it so that they can come in and express themselves. I'm just one person. But I do know that there are a lot of people very upset with having to wear these things. Why I came in here today is I went into the bank last Thursday. I usually just use the ATM. I had to go inside. And yeah, people in that bank having to wear these things all day long. It's terrible. Are we making children wear these things in school still? And now you've got this vaccine mandate coming up, and they're going to give it to these young children, and it's going to be forced on them? This Dr. Fauci, who was, because Vanity Fair said he's the sexiest man in America, but that's going to change to, he's going to be Dr. Mengele, worse than Dr. Mengele, if you know who he was. This is forcing medical treatments on people against their will. And I think people have to have the opportunity to speak. I mean, funding is one thing, I know that's important, but people's children are very important as well. People's jobs are important. So I do hope that you will not extend this emergency too far and allow people to comment on this before it comes to a head. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
If I could briefly respond, this item has nothing to do with state mandates, state requirements, or the enforcement of state requirements. So I would make sure that we don't, in our presentation, address those. Those are outside the purview of this board. The board does not have the discretion to control what happens in the school districts or to what happens at the state level. What we're looking at here and what we'll bring back is the local emergency and how it affects our funding sources and what it provides to the county, not looking at the state level.
Well, I think would be part of your presentation that I requested, is the impacts of this to those sort of things, so.
And if I may, just because the federal government says there's an emergency, just because the state government says there's an emergency, I mean, we have the system of government so that you can have a say too, representing the people that elected you. And this emergency designation, which has created the opportunity to create all these infringements on people's ability to live freely. I thank you again.
All right.
So I have one comment. I don't think we should refer to this as Dr. Mengele, the 1940s Auschwitz, Poland concentration camps, for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, unless there's any other comments on the item, we could entertain a motion.
I just would ask if I could have the gentleman's contact information.
I believe it was provided in the letter that I sent out and will include in the backup. I'll make sure we have it.
All right, I'll move to approve this resolution as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Chairman Brown, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox? Aye. Supervisor Gogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
With that, we go down to reports and announcements. Item 3.1, report from department heads. Are there department heads in the room wishing to report out? And are there department heads on Zoom wishing to report out? We'll bring it back to the room.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Supervisors. David Kolbeck, Interim Deputy Director for the Department of Transportation. This is just me standing up here in the first opportunity to speak to you and see if there's any questions that you'd like to ask of the Department of Transportation, perhaps particularly in response to the declaration of local emergency that was passed at the last board meeting. Just to express that our efforts to be responsive to the supervisors' concerns about specific roads within their respective districts. We are making efforts to address any fire damage or storm-related damage that is occurring across the county, in particular Friedrich Road or Route C, Van Dusen Road or Coffee Creek Road. So just know that our crews are out there, or that the public should know our crews are out there trying to prioritize and address specific problems as they arise. I encourage both supervisors and the public to continue to inform us of any particular problems through our online complaint system or by calling the Department of Transportation to allow us to understand what's happening out there in your communities. Along those lines as well, DOT of course is working with local county agencies to interface with OES at the state level as well as FEMA to address ongoing concerns for funding, the potential for reimbursement, and to be able to be in the appropriate position to address these disasters as we move forward into this winter. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, so Coffee Creek Road has OES gone out there and taken a look at it yet?
I'm not certain that they made that field visit. I can't speak to that specifically. I know that our crews have, and that we are looking at a number of options in terms of funding sources under emergency powers, specifically to address the debris slide that occurred at about milepost 4.1. So as we are getting crews out there, in respect to, say, Environmental Health Director Christy Anderson's efforts with Phase 1 cleanup, as well as the initiation of Phase 2 cleanup for individual private properties, we are assessing our ability to gain access to particular properties. Again, I can't speak specifically to OES.
Okay. Is there a timeline on that?
As fast as possible is what I wish to say. Recognizing that the efforts over the last week and a half, we are very conscious of that debris slide in particular and the dangers that those represent to those communities downstream of that debris slide. So while it's a very complicated problem in terms of the amount of material and the complexity of that particular project, I requested our senior staff engineers in our department to begin addressing how we can begin to safely remove that threat to that community and to the county road itself. So speaking of that localized point, there's also of course concerns further up Coffee Creek Road in terms of accessibility. And again, for the Phase 1 and Phase 2 access considerations, particularly access across the creek for individual private bridges that were washed out or otherwise rendered unsafe. That is all in our consideration right now.
Thank you, Dave.
All right. Any other department heads wishing to report out on Zoom? All right, looks like none. And item 2, report from County Administrative Officer. Dr. Coons will assume that you're gonna stay out of this.
He wanted me to inform the board that he had no report at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we come to a report from Board of Supervisor members. We start Supervisor Groves, work our way down.
Jill.
No, I don't have anything. We'll talk about canvas later.
Supervisor Scott?
Just a couple of things quickly. At the fire chiefs meeting last evening, the fire chiefs wish to convey their gratitude and praise, really, of the community in the way that they were helpful and responsive and participated in all of the fire efforts. And they just very sincerely and wholeheartedly wanted everybody to be very aware of that. Secondly, the RAC, the Resource Advisory Committee, will be meeting on a third date as well. So I had announced November 8th and 15th at 4 o'clock in this room, or also available on Zoom, to go over proposals that have been made, and they've received so many, they've extended that as well, realizing they're probably going to need December 13th also. That December 13th also falls on the last town hall that I had scheduled for this year, and so we will be yielding that to them as well. That is the end.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Gogan?
Yeah, I went to the Trinity County Fair Board meeting a week or so ago. I also met with Aaron Rogers from the hospital a week or so ago about his situation there with his employees and the upcoming mandates for COVID. And he seems to think that they have things in good shape there, which is good to hear. And then yesterday, me and Dan met for the limited density owner built rural dwellings, which I'll call Class K. Dan will call limited density owner built rural dwellings. And we're working on it with Margaret, and I'll let Dan comment more on that.
I don't have anything to report until we get down to the ad hoc report out.
All right. Myself, I attended the Willow Creek Capitol Christmas tree event on Saturday the 30th. Gave a brief little public talk there and was joined by Humboldt County Supervisor Steve Madrone. It was a nice event to see the community together. As I said at the last meeting, it would have been nice to have something here in Weaverville, but due to the road logistics, it wasn't possible. I will be headed to Sacramento after the meeting today to go to the Christmas tree event in Sacramento tomorrow, and have some meetings lined up down there as well afterwards. Other than that, to report out, the highway continues to get cleaned up. They are moving to a more aggressive highway closure during the daytime. I think 4-hour closures between 7:30 and 12:30 and 4:30. So I know it's been troublesome and kind of challenging, or not kind of, very challenging for people commuting to Weaverville High School and sports events. We're trying to organize a community meeting at the Burnt Ranch School so Caltrans can come and field questions from the public. But the short story is that they don't want this to turn into another French Creek 2-year project, and this is the best way they have found to be able to expedite the workload required to remove the threat of this slide growing. Additionally, Frontier continues to work its way down the list of, what do we call it, respectable business practices. They are not very responsive with my inquiries on weekly updates, nor have they honored their policy of not billing customers that have been receiving no service for 2 months. So I'm going to get more aggressive with them. Hopefully they don't go bankrupt in the process. In the meantime, a lot of people are converting over to satellite internet because that comes with phone services that can usually have a local number associated to that satellite service, like a 530 or 623 or 629. So a lot of people are just making that switch and canceling their Frontier service. I believe Frontier has reserved service to Big Bar, Big Flat, and Del Loma, maybe as of a week ago. I saw trucks in the Burnt Ranch area last week, but did not get a response on my inquiry. I believe that concludes my report out. And this cannabis ad hoc and Class K ad hoc on report out.
Go ahead.
Okay. So what's happening in Canvas ad hoc? We did meet again last Thursday. And so the developments, which I'm sure you saw, but TAA filed, I don't know exactly what the right word is, but they filed their concerns with the court on our transition plan. So therefore, council recommended that we not have TAA members in our ad hoc meeting without council, since they've moved forward on that decision. So what we will be doing, though, we have a discussion this week about opt-outs and TA members that are in opt-outs, as long as we don't talk about transition plan. And as long as they don't file with the courts on opt-outs, then we can talk to them about opt-outs, individual members of TAA. Again, the cannabis growers want to be in the room separately. So we're having basically two meetings, non-cannabis growers and cannabis growers. So there were some questions that came up in this, and I'll answer these here just so the public can know. People wanted to know what happens when the state calls about their state license, and since Kim's going to be leaving, at this point Margaret will be answering those questions, and if they are in progress, the answer to the state is they are in CEQA process. It was asked how much Sean is going to get paid to be the overseer, and I believe this number is probably not exact, but it's around $175 an hour. There was also one or two members of TCAA requested that we bring in a new or an additional environmental lawyer to aid or oversee Derek. I had discussions with council on that matter. I want to bring this to the board as a whole, so if the board wants to have that discussion, we can. But at this time, I'm not recommending that, and I'll let Dan speak for himself. And then we are working on a way to get the consultants into the ad hoc process, because they're going to be an important part of this process. So we hope by probably not this meeting, but the next meeting, we'll have consultants calling in, keeping us apprised of where they're at, what problems they have. And with that, I think that's a nice brief report out. Dan, you reading this?
I think you got it.
Okay.
I don't think I need to add anything to that.
Okay.
And I would mirror your opinion. I don't think that we need to bring on further counsel for sequel counsel either, but that's up to the board as a whole.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that,
We still have limited density dwelling ad hoc report out. Liam and I actually met twice in the last little over a week. We met Monday, was it Monday? And last month, we met Monday here, and last week we met in Hayfork just to discuss how we wanted to proceed and try to figure out what our objective was. At that point, we took copies of the resolution that came from the Trinity County Planning Commission in November of 2018. We each went and personally looked over that, came up with some suggestions and stuff we thought needed to be clarified. And yesterday we brought Margaret into the conversation to see what her thoughts were and if she could help us to clean that up. One of my main concerns was I wanted it to be a zoning ordinance. The original draft that we had opt-out areas in it, which I wanted to not get into. So we are trying to do this strictly through zoning if we're going to allow it, have allowable zones and not opt-out areas. So when we get that stuff cleaned up, we will take it to Director Lozier and have her go over it, see if she has any concerns. But talking to her at the beginning of the process, she did not want to be directly involved with our ad hoc because the main reason we're doing it as an ad hoc is to take the pressure off of her. So we're going to try to do all the legwork and then present it to Lisa. And once we get to that point, we'll be back to the board with further report and get direction from that point. Anything else, Liam?
No, I think we started out with a pretty comprehensive ordinance that you guys written back in 1819. A few tweaks here and there with Margaret's help. I don't think it's going to be too difficult to do, and you're right, Lisa does not want to see much but the final product or close to it, which I fully understand. So I think we're making finally some good headway on this, and I think we'll get it done here shortly. And thanks, Margaret, for her help yesterday morning with us working through this.
All right. Thanks for those report outs. Unless we need to take a break, we'll...
Can I step back for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to the cannabis ad hoc. Keith said that because of TAA's comments to the board, they have been excluded from the upcoming ad hoc meetings or separated from.
So it was not their comments to the board, it's the comments that they've tried to bring the transition plan into the lawsuit. My understanding, and Margaret, jump in when I make a mistake here, which will probably be soon, but during the suit, the court ruled that we must comply with CEQA. The court did not rule on how specifically we did that. The transition plan was part of our process to come through. Was not court ordered to give him the plan. The TAA has submitted that plan with their comments to bring the judge into start in the process of kind of ruling on everything we do in this process. So with them bringing this into a legal discussion, counsel had said that any transition plan problems would have to be done through counsel. So as discussions with the transition plan and the ad hoc is the TAA members or counsel are, we're asking them to have discussions with our counsel and not with us on items that they haven't brought to the board, such as opt-outs. Counsel says that we can allow those discussions.
That's correct. It's not what the matters that were brought to the board. It's when the matters are made subject to a litigation that counsel gets triggered. So comments to the boards, letter to the boards, that doesn't trigger counsel's involvement, but the moment it becomes a court action, you are represented by counsel. Counsel does need to be present in all discussions related to that.
So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's I appreciate that, thank you.
It's a shame. I believe that we should have all people involved in that moving forward, but this is the animal that we're in right now.
All right. Good to go to county matters? Everybody? Sounds good. These items include non-routine or controversial matters that are listed alphabetically by department, member of the board or staff, and requested that be heard out of order. Board of Supervisors, item 4.1. Appoint Carol Fall to the Planning Commission for the position of Planning Commissioner District 1 to serve a term concurrent with the District 1 Supervisor known as Fiscal Impact. Grove, is this you?
This is me. So now that Mike is dead to me, we have to move on. and sorry, Mike, if you're still on. So I've been in the process. Commissioner McHugh had given a long lead time for me to search around, and search I did. And had many qualified people apply. I will say that in sadness to my part, I had one qualified that was in kind of the final four, but had been bullied by legal cannabis growers and quasi-threatened, which was very disheartening to me. That dropped out. But again, my final count all would have been good commissioners. Carol Fall has, as you can see in her resume, a long history of working. And what I want to really point out, that I was very impressed. Carol Fall was the assistant fire chief for the Trinity Center Fire Department during this fire crisis that we had. And she put in many long hours, very to the point with the Forest Service, demanding that the Forest Service do things to help our community, and was very professional at the same time. And she's very interested in getting work on the general plan. So with that, I'm proud to ask that Carol Fall be appointed to the Planning Commission to serve out my terms or term in as District 1 Supervisor.
All right, do you have any objections from the board?
I have a question. Did everybody get this? Am I reading this wrong?
They got two of them. There's two, well, there's one application and one other application.
So I thought you picked someone.
There was a little mistake because my fault for not being able to make up my mind until Friday morning.
Okay.
And I had submitted different resumes, so Emma could get right on that as soon as I pulled the trigger on one. And so there were two resumes that were left in the backup.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, I will move.
Public comment, please?
Oh my God.
Is there any public comment from the room? Seeing none. We have no new chats
Just keep going. Yeah.
and no raised hands. You are now free to make a motion. Thank you.
I'll move to approve item 4.1 as presented and appoint Carol Fall to the Planning Commission for the District 1 position.
I will second.
Motion by Chairman Brown, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox? Aye. Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
So I think it's important that, I don't know if Kim's listening or whoever on their last days, we really need to be able to get a lead person on getting her general plan, her rezone books, and I know there's some planning trainings coming up that I know other new commissioners are going to be too, so I don't know who's going to try to take the lead on that, but if anybody's out there in Zoom land.
We'll make sure it gets done. I'll work with Lisa on that.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner McHugh has volunteered to counsel her anytime that she would require that, so I want to thank him for that. Now I'm done.
You sure?
No, but
All right. We can go to the next item, Clerk of the Board, item 4.2, appoint a primary and an alternate representative, California State Association of Counties, Board of Directors, no fiscal impact. I think this is just the annual update, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and as of now, I believe Supervisor Groves, you are the main, and Supervisor Cox, you're the alternate, is that right? All right, well, unless there's any objections, we'll just continue that. All right.
is that a question? No, I thank you for the vote of confidence. We get back to CSAC meetings in person, so.
If someone else would enjoy taking the alternate for CSAC, I would like to be able to concentrate just on the alternate for our CRC.
I will say this, that myself and Jeremy worked at RCRC this month or so ago, and it was the first one I've been to. I know Jeremy's been to a few of them. It was very, very informative. It was really, I'd highly recommend going. I know you're sick, but I highly recommend going to that. And all of us going to it. I think we're all welcome to go to it. So this would be Keith being the lead on the CSAC and me being the alternate. Is that what you're saying, Joe? Keith, you all right with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, Liam.
Okay.
One of the nice things about CSAC that's coming up, and you know, like RCRC, all supervisors are welcome, and it really lends itself to an opportunity to see that you're not alone out there, that these are not, whatever your problems are not just the unique burdens that are listed just on us. So, yeah, that's no problem.
Some of our burdens are unique to us.
Yeah, some are.
So Keith, can you give me an just indication of the workload and what?
As the alternate, there's not much. Most of the workload would be actually just sitting on and listening to reports as much as you wanted to. So CSAC has what's going on in the state meetings at least once or twice a month, and then we have the regular CSAC meetings once a quarter. And again, those are being zoomed or listened to. The workload is really when they have the annual conferences, and then there's another conference during the year. So like this one coming up is in Monterey. The other really valuable thing is once you get into kind of learning what they've got going there, there's a lot of resources there. And like RCRC has those same sort of resources, but these are the ability to be, you know, statewide resources that, and they are very helpful. I mean, they're worth whatever dues we pay because they're very responsive. They just don't ignore us. So.
How long have you been on it?
I've just been on a year. I was an alternate for a long time, but as an alternate, Judy Morris was a very strong CSAC leader. She was actually an officer. So my workload was very light under her. I do remember a meeting in Disneyland though.
That'll be next year.
Next year's Disneyland?
I think so.
Okay. Hopefully we've killed the COVID by then.
Can we get that chance to Disney World?
No, that would be NACO if you want to.
So that'd be fine. I would like to be alternate with Keith on this.
All right, so Emma, can you make note that there's a switch of Supervisor Cox removing herself as alternate and Supervisor Gogan taking the alternate position for CSAC?
We can do that.
All right.
Council, do we need a motion on this item?
And these appointments are done by the chair unless the chair doesn't want to, and then it would be done by motion.
Ooh.
Thank you, I just wanted to make sure.
That works for me. So is there public comment on this?
I think you get to be a dictator.
All right, we'll just keep going.
I'm not seeing any movement, so.
All right, then so be appointed. I say thy Gogan as the alternate.
Are you going to the meeting?
I'm planning going to the December meeting.
I went to the CSAC, I think it was the first annual meeting, and I was also at the new Supervisors Institute, and they overlapped each other. And it was pretty overwhelming for me going from no politic experience to the new Supervisor Institute, and the handbook is that big, and it's all about California legislation and all the rules and codes and all the other counties, and then everything you're supposed to know for your job. And then to get thrown into this big group of 500 other officials from across the state who have been doing it sometimes for 12 years or longer. And it was overwhelming, but also it was really reassuring for me because there were a lot of things about Trinity County that I thought were unique, and I found out that they really weren't too unique. There are some other rural counties out there that have all sorts of similar issues to Trinity County. And that was reassuring to me to just get a little bit more perspective from the statewide issue, because as much as we're Trinity County, we're also California, and all these counties work together, or at least they're supposed to work together, to best serve California's needs. And it was a good forum to kind of focus on that and get a little breath of fresh air outside of Trinity County's specific issues and bounce ideas off of other counties that have worked through issues.
So then they have workshops
Right.
at the meetings, and you can just go pick, like right now you can say, hey, that one sounds really interesting, that I go to, you know, you can go to, and they're usually very open forums where you can talk and ask questions of experts.
Were you ever on RCRC? Did you ever?
I never did. I wanted to be on RCRC my first year, and Supervisor Finley said tough.
Oh.
And that was the end of that.
You said tough or no. So I found that last RCRC was generally really.
RCRC is a very valuable asset.
Yeah, and it was more focused on kind of, well, rural communities obviously, but when I get into some of the CSAC stuff, it's a little more California, and a lot of that stuff isn't quite our stuff. But I guess I would look at this as the big brother of RCRC in a way.
There's one thing to realize about CSAC is that it's not as urban as you think, because these are the counties, and so Los Angeles County is more rural than you might think, because there's Los Angeles City that is all this. So you'll find that there's a lot of rural areas even in the urban, you know, besides San Francisco, I think, but that are not incorporated. So
What's nice is you can get those urban entities and agencies or other counties to also back the Trinity County's needs, and they have their own weight and pull as an entity that can be helpful to them. All right,
Very good.
so be it. Next item, grants. Item 4.3, approve an agreement with Glenn County Community Action Department to provide homeless housing assistance and prevention funding under round 1. No impact to the general fund, $146,666 in revenue to the grants department. So grants department, is this a Susie Cochran's item?
It is, and I am on. Good morning, everybody. The contract in front of you today is an agreement for funding from the state of California that runs through the homeless continuum of care. And our lead agency for the homeless continuum of care is the Glenn County Community Action Department. So this is an agreement between Trinity County and the Glenn County Community Action Department for grant funding in the amount of $146,666. This funding is to support our our housing unit and homeless services, primarily rental assistance, for a 2-year period. This funding is through the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. This is round 1 of 3 rounds of funding that are currently out. So this is just the start of this funding, and the first time I'll be in front of you asking for approval for an agreement. So I will accept any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Susan? Hearing none. All right. Is there any public comment on this item?
I see none in the room, and I have no raised hands and no new comments.
All right. Well, we could entertain a motion.
I would move to adopt item 4.3 as presented.
All right.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Cox, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox? Aye. Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. Next item, Human Resources, item 4.4. Pursuant to Trinity County Code Section 2.60.410A, authorized hiring employee number 02100 as Behavioral Health Case Manager I at Range G 188 Step C in the Behavioral Health Services Department effective November 1st, 2021. No impact to the general fund. Approximate cost of salary and benefits per month for Behavioral Health Case Manager I at A Step is $6,227, and C-step is $6,752.
Good morning. Shelley Nelson, HR Director. So Behavioral Health has been running a recruitment to fill a vacancy of a case manager 1 since August. The applicant that scored the highest amongst the interview panelists has been working with the department since 2014 and has 7 years relatable experience, which exceeds the minimum requirements of this entry and first working level in case management series. The department is wishing authority from you to offer above A step at C step, which of the salary in the range does commensurate with the employee's training and experience.
All right, are there any questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item?
I see none in the room. I have no new comments and no raised hands.
All right. I'll move to approve item 4.4 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Chairman Brown, second by Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Groves, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Kogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item, 4.5. Pursuant to Trinity County Code Section 2.60.410A, authorize hiring employee number 01789 as accountant 3 at range M236, step D in Behavioral Health Services Department, effective November 1st, 2021. No impact to the general fund. Approximate cost of salary benefits per month for accountant 3 at A step is $9,259 and D step is $10,544.
So Behavioral Health has also been running a recruitment to fill a vacancy for an accountant 3. The applicant that scored the highest has over 11 years of accounting experience and 2 years in management. And they're requesting to offer above A step at D step. The salary range, in step would also commensurate with their training and experience, which exceeds the minimum requirements.
All right. Any additional questions? Any public comment?
I see none in the room. I have no new chats and no raised hands.
I'll move to approve item 4.5 as presented.
Second.
Motion by Chairman Brown, second by Supervisor Cox. Supervisor Cox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Kogan?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item, 4.6, modify the department allocation list for clerk, recorder, assessor office to read 2 to administrative coordinator 1-2 or assessment technician 1-2 or appraiser 1-2 or chief appraiser effective November 1st, 2021. Approximate cost and salary benefits per month for an administrative coordinator 1 at A step is $6,051 and for administrative coordinator 2 is $6,587.
So the Clerk Recorder Assessor's Office is requesting to modify their department allocation listing by adding an Administrative Coordinator 1-2 to the series of classifications that also include the assessment technicians, the appraisers, and the chief appraiser. This is not adding any allocations, it's just adding classifications which would provide flexible staffing and also assist the department in recruiting and hiring staff. Appreciate your consideration.
Are there any questions for Shelley? No? Is there any public comment on this item?
I have none in the room. I have no new chats and no raised hands, excuse me.
All right, well, congratulations on finding 3 new employees. That is great. And entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept 4.6 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor Groves, second by Supervisor Kogan. Supervisor Kogan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Cox?
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Shelley. Does anyone need to take a break, or are we good to keep on going?
Could we take a short break, please?
Yes, we can do what you want. 10 or 15 minutes?
That's fine.
All right, you decide.
Since Kim's not in the room.
You decide and post it.
Are we ready?
Kim's going to do this by Zoom.
I think she's out in the hall.
She's still there.
All right.
I think she's out in the hall.
Okay.
You know, Dan, this is very archaic, okay? Yeah, don't lose it. It's very important. That's, my battery never goes dead.
What? What are you looking at?
No. So when they make copies of it, it disappears, so it's like you're invisible. No, we're not quite.
It calculates it, just, this is the calculation. Same amount, it's just the division. It's calculated, yeah. For some reason.
They're gonna let me know when we're all set.
All right, I'm gonna start unreading everything.
All right, everyone all set?
All right.
All right, thanks for your patience. We are back to the meeting. We are continuing on at planning and zoning. Item 4.7, receive a staff presentation, discuss and provide direction regarding the revised transition plan for the commercial cannabis program. No fiscal impact. And Director Hunter.
Good morning. Kim Hunter, Building and Planning Director. We'll be providing just a brief, more of a staff report than a presentation.
The mic, please.
Yep, I got it. Sorry, I was trying to go fast.
Good morning. Building and Planning Director Kim Hunter. There'll be a brief just staff presentation. I'll speak a few words, and David Kolbeck will be assisting, and I will hand it over to him once I say a few things about what's before you today. And that is a draft revised transition plan. We did very much listen to the comments that were provided on the plan and the discussion that occurred at the last board meeting when this was presented. That was the October 19th meeting. And the low-hanging fruit is obviously the concerns about sentence structure and corrections and typos and those types of things. But one of the concerns definitely was, which I want to provide clarification on, is that this is called a transition plan, but really, please think about it as an implementation plan more so. It's not to avoid CEQA, the process that's established by state law for the California Environmental Quality Act in any way, shape, or form. It's to implement it, and that is our first and foremost goal with the Appendix C documents, with this plan, with the certification of the EIR, is doing what the county needs to do with the cannabis program, the licenses, and getting them into compliance with CEQA. That is the intent. So if there's any question on that, which there seemed to be at the last meeting, I did definitely want to establish that and make that very clear. So the plan does, there's been work on what's before you today, the draft revision. However, learning from the comments, listening to the comments and learning from past mistakes or situations. In this case, we're presenting this plan to you for your review and seeking any direction. The idea in this concept is not to take action today, but to allow 2 weeks for a comment period for folks to look over this. We've already received some very helpful comments that will only make this plan better, and we are absolutely open to that. So that is the situation that we're looking to, is allowing time for folks to review this, to comment, to submit those comments, and then additional time for staff to review those comments and incorporate those comments or address those issues as needed, and bring this plan ultimately back before you at a later date to be determined. It may be during a special meeting or the regular meeting date. I'm not sure. That's not been determined. We don't know how long it will take to make those changes to the plan, but hopefully as soon as possible, but not rush it either. We do have a plan in place. We'd like to make this better and improve it and make it more effective, and that will take a little bit of time. So that is what I have to say, and I'll hand it over to David.
Thank you, Director Hunter. Good morning, Supervisors, Chair. David Kolbeck, Interim Deputy Director for Department of Transportation, and I'm finally narrowing down an advisor to the Cannabis Division. I think that works. So I actually, before I say anything further, I just wanted to thank Director Hunter for the opportunity to work with her over these past several years. I will miss you in terms of the negotiations, discussions, conversations, all the ups and downs that we've been through. I just want to appreciate your service, so thank you. And saying that specifically because I believe this is your last meeting. I will admit that I'm of two minds here in terms of how to proceed. I could either have something of a presentation to address specific problems or comments, I should say, that have been raised since the October 19th meeting. As Director Hunter mentioned, some very valuable comments that are worth addressing. So one option is to go through those, but I think I will stick with the advice I have received when presenting to the board, and that is to don't say too much, respond to questions as they're asked. So I believe that with some memos and letters that have been submitted to the board since the October 19th meeting and since the publication, I can say, of the agenda today, is that you have some materials in front of you. One of those I want to point out that I believe I had forwarded on Monday is from Derek Cole, and our special counsel for CWIT matters, of course, and cannabis overall. So I just want to highlight to the board that some memos, I believe, from Mr. Underwood, both received by the board, but also that those were responded to by special counsel. So I'm familiar with those, but I will leave this as just an opening to discuss as you wish, and I'm hoping that the supervisors will have some prepared plans or prepared questions that they would like to address, like us to address as we're able. That being said, also with this comment period going or opening up for the next several weeks, I look forward to more discussions along these lines whenever available, either in a formal setting or otherwise. I believe ad hoc in the report out today mentioned that there's some limitations, of course, in our ability to do that, but as open to those discussions as I'm able to be. So with that, I'll just look forward to any questions directly from the supervisors.
Sir?
I just have a question to council. So the letter that we received, David received from Mr. Cole, does that fall under the privilege category, or is that now in open?
It was placed on the agenda, correct?
Yeah.
It has not been added to the agenda backup. I placed it in the letters submitted after the agenda posting, and I received it regarding the agenda. My plan was to include it in the backup after this meeting, but if it's privileged information, I will not.
So technically, it would be privileged information unless the board would like to open it up. So it would be the board's pleasure if you want to make that a public document.
Okay. But of course, the letter from Mr. Underwood is public because he sent that.
He sent that item to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. All right.
So that is my understanding.
That's correct. The only privileged documents are those of your council.
Right. All right, thank you.
So should we speak to that now?
Yeah.
I think, personally, with, I think we're gonna be having some continued back and forth with Jim Underwood TA and Derek. I think as far as transparency goes, it would be nice for the general public to know that our CEQA attorney is giving the best answers possible to the questions that are asked, and his feelings and his backup to them, as he did in this memo here that David sent us. So I am, as long as it's legal to do, I'm good with doing that. One question I do have though is, he wasn't the only one obviously that asked the question. Not all of the questions will be answered by Derek, I assume. We will be handling some, or the next director, or David. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever the questions may be.
So, was there official process for determining if we make this document public, or is it by majority board vote?
It'd be by majority board vote to make that document public.
Okay, so does any board member wish to not make this document public? All right, does that work? So when can the public expect to be able to look at the
I
responses?
will add this, all of the letters I've received subsequent to the posting of the agenda to the online agenda version as soon as possible after this board meeting.
Okay, so later this afternoon it might be available?
Yes.
Okay, so later this afternoon or at the latest tomorrow morning, this additional document from Derek Cole outlining responses of the concerns of Jim Underwood will be added to the agenda website. And does anyone have any specific questions they'd like to ask David Kolbeck to get started?
How many other responses do we get from the general public having to do with this transition plan? And were they good, bad, and different on the whole?
They would have been emailed to you. They would have been emailed.
All of them were emailed to me?
Yeah.
The ones that
Okay.
received as addressed to the board would have been forwarded to you.
Got them and read them.
I believe there was 3 or maybe
That was it,
4.
just 3 or 4?
Something
Okay,
like that.
very good.
All right, well, can I ask some questions?
Regarding the comments though,
Oh.
we have not received any since,
Okay.
but it wasn't really opened up for comment like it is now. We're, accepting, and there's lots of comments made at the meeting. Also, the additional time allows us to have our consultants who will be processing Appendix Cs and have a lot of experience also review the plan. And one of those consultants has already provided very helpful comments.
Good.
So it would just allow time and give people time to look at it. So I do expect more comments to come in. But this will be a very positive step being taken.
Very good. Now, I know David's been on, I'm surprised to see this actually, but I know he's been on vacation for a while and he comes back soon, I think. Derek.
To clarify, if I could, yes, Special Counsel Cole is actually in trial for much of this week, so he's a busy man, but I have had a number of discussions with him. He has made himself available. I didn't intend to overstate the point of whether we received, say, formal public comments. I was really more generally speaking to, yes, as Director Hunter mentioned, the public comments received on the October 19th meeting, as well as any number of numerous internal discussions, I guess I can say. So in terms of our working through comments, it was in that vein that I was speaking to, not specifically to a plethora of comments received by the public. However, moving forward, I do anticipate that.
All right. May I ask a question? All right, well, the biggest thing I've been hearing about, and it's it mostly comes from the growers that have their licenses. They're worried about or wondering about the NOD versus the compliance determination and kind of how that flow works. Does a compliance determination equate to an NOD? Is the NOD the formally recognized terminology that CEQA addresses? Or is compliance determination also in that formal language of CEQA? And then kind of an extension of all of that is there any other jurisdiction that has utilized the compliance determination for this type of process? Those are the realms of the questions that I'm getting asked a lot, and I wanted to bring them to the public meeting to be addressed.
Perfect. I'm going to, again, start off and then hand it over to David. Notice of determination, that's an NOD. A notice of determination is when a full-on CEQA initial study is completed and it's brought before the Planning Commission or the board, the final approving body, for a vote on that determination along with the project. So that's the full CEQA. We refer to Appendix G, the CEQA guidelines. That results in a notice of determination that is filed with the county clerk. If it's a notice of exemption, it's filed with the clerk as well for a categorical or statutory exemption. There's a few other types of exemptions. So the NOE and the NOD terms are where you're doing full CEQA analysis on a project. NOE not so much, the NOD. So with the NOD, a notice of determination was filed with the EIR. A notice of determination is filed with a mitigated neg deck or just a regular neg deck, negative declaration that doesn't have mitigations. So that's when an NOD comes into play. These are not going in front of the Planning Commission. So in this case, a compliance determination is saying you have met the requirements of the ordinance and are in compliance with the certified EIR. And that is where the streamlining comes in, is since the program has a certified EIR with the mitigation measures through that process and the Appendix C checklist that accompanies the EIR and the ordinance, a compliance determination is basically you are in compliance with the EIR and the ordinance. It doesn't need to be a full-on notice of determination because you have the EIR. And I'm looking at David. So that's my version of the story. But does that answer some of those questions? If there's a conditional use permit that's required by a certain use, then the applicant's going to be going to the Planning Commission and possibly to the board if it requires board review, and there'll be a notice of determination filed when the determination is made on CEQA prior to the project approval. But if there's not a conditional use permit or some type of action that triggers that, and it's just, say, a type 2 cultivation license, then that could just go under the Appendix C document in the EIR in the program with a compliance determination.
Okay.
If I could add to that, well stated, please. Director Hunter. Yes, I understand that in a lot of these discussions, both in the past and of course right now, the issue at hand is a question of the language that we're using. And it becomes a tricky field, I suppose, in terms of terms and the words that are describing the process that we're conducting right now. One of those, of course, is the idea of notice of determination, an NOD, and as Director Hunter stated, that is more of a formal CEQA process that is outlined in our code, as well as general environmental law under CEQA. It allows for public comment, it allows for the notification to decision makers of any environmental impacts or factors. Notice of determination has to be filed with the clerk, of course, but also may be filed with the state to allow anybody to really comment on any particular project related to land use that is under the CEQA purview anywhere. That is the overall structure or intent of CEQA. What we're saying here, though, is that we're looking at a compliance determination. And not to go into the weeds, that was debated a fair bit in terms of our office and the development of our process is what to call that. A compliance determination, a determination of compliance, a consistency determination. Well, we've settled basically with a compliance determination. And again, that language can become confusing. But I think that it's a clear term to use, a compliance determination. What I wish to highlight, though, as Director Hunter mentioned, is that with our checklist, the Appendix C, our ordinance, our EIR, everything that we're doing is intended to make sure that any particular operation of whatever license type is in compliance with CEQA and in compliance with the ordinance. That has always been the goal and remains the goal. We are couching this under 15168C, which is in CEQA statute guidelines that says that this is a later activity that is subsequent or is following, I should say, be careful about language, is following the EIR and the ordinance requirements in terms of performance standard. Part of your question, Supervisor Brown, was do other jurisdictions do this? This is something that any jurisdiction or any county in the state is looking to address in their own unique ways. We are not unique in the challenges that we're facing with cannabis, but we can pick a path that is suitable for us, which is what we're trying to do. So while I can't speak to all the different processes in every other jurisdiction in terms of how they're complying for state environmental law, I can say that this is an appropriate path for us to be pursuing, and that is why it is in front of you or has been proposed, or has been adopted by resolution, I should say. So for other jurisdictions, I would say that I would stick with that this is appropriate. I think another component of your question, Supervisor Brown, was to say for an individual cannabis licensee or applicant, what does this mean? What are they getting? And so in summary, they are getting what you're calling a compliance determination, which is essentially a memo to the file. And there's details in that in terms of what exactly they have to do, but it becomes a determination that then allows the Department of Cannabis Control to move forward with state licensure. It allows us to move forward with our own license structure, and it allows us to regulate the mitigations that are a required component of particular licensed operations.
Can compliance determinations be challenged by the public or a special interest group? And if so, what is the time frame for how long that can be challenged for? I don't know if that's a you question or a Margaret question or a who question.
How about me?
You're looking on the other side of the room. Yes, as the way the transition plan is written right now, it is very similar process to what we've been doing with license renewals and new licenses where there's notices going out to adjacent landowners and the paper 10 days before approval. And then once the approval is given, basic approval of the compliance determination, then there is 10 working days after that decision can be appealed. That is how it's written right now.
And then,
Process.
So it's 10 days after notice? Okay.
Yeah, we notice 10 days before the decision to approve. And then once it's approved, that action can be appealed.
For 10 days.
For 10 working days, for a period of 10 working days after.
And after that, it's essentially set in stone and statute of limitations apply?
Ooh, not really,
Yes, I appreciate that question. So I think one way to approach an answer here is that through a notice of determination, or say you're putting together and receiving a certified CEQA document, there are in the statutes limitations, a statute of limitations. I'm not trying to be redundant, but CEQA lays out the idea of how something can be challenged, essentially. yes, you have to go through your administrative appeal processes, and yes, there's some issues, but the idea in CEQA is that you have a limited time in order to challenge a project. CEQA is meant to sort of front load it, where you have all this public comment, you have all these meetings and everything before a project is approved, all the analysis, all the discussion. And then once the project is approved, there's a very limited time, say 30 days, in order for it to be challenged. There are some caveats in there in terms of nuance and detail. Is it 30 days or 90 days? Well, all of that is to say that that is the CEQA process. But as I just described in my previous answer, this is actually not the process that we're pursuing. We're pursuing a later activity with a compliance determination. It is not the same as a notice of determination that would need to be certified by our county code, by the Planning Commission, or the board if it's an EIR. So again, there's kind of a divide here. One is CEQA has gotten us to this point of EIR and all the analysis and all the mitigations and everything that we are dealing with here on an individual license basis. But what we're saying is that, hey, we're going to move forward with this and implement all of those mitigations for everybody across the board, but it's not a CEQA process in that regard that there's that 30-day limit on it. Rather, we're using the planning law sort of procedural law, where it's a 10-day note of a right to appeal. And that is how due process is being approached for an individual to challenge a decision, a determination, the decision to issue a license. That is the framework that we're relying on here. So again, it's kind of it's a little bit muddy, but there's a divide here. It's not the CEQA, but it's planning law. And I can defer happily to council if you wish to speak.
I don't know if I need to add anything to it. I think that was explained perfectly. I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Well, thank you. Are there additional questions from the board?
But within, yes, I guess. There you go. But within that appeal process, there is not just the 10 days, it's that the appeal can be appealed.
The 10 working days following approval for the appeal process is just that time where appeal can be filed.
Right, but then that appeal goes to
The Planning Commission.
Commission, and then that can be appealed to the board,
Mm-hmm.
and then that can be appealed to the courts.
Correct.
But it must, Margaret's looking at me funny. Okay.
And that is the process of administrative remedies, yes.
Okay, so, but that's only about if your determination has been correct. So that you have followed.
No, yes, but also that determination will also, that will be when the license is issued as well, because the license is the project. So the CEQA is being done for the project, so it's the license and the completeness determination that are being noticed.
Okay. What I'm getting at is one of the people that commented to me, and I can't remember, she commented to the whole board, was when does a community get to say, we don't care about CEQA, we just don't want this in our community? This process.
That would be the ordinance amendment point. Right now, staff is following the ordinance that we have approved.
Okay, so nowhere in this transition plan.
No, the transition plan is for the CEQA process.
Right. And nowhere in the CEQA process is that a part of what happens.
No.
So that would be in the ordinance and through an opt-out or other amendments to the ordinance.
Correct.
I just want to make that clear for the public to understand.
Yes.
Perhaps I can jump in here. I'm also realizing I'm sitting in a new seat. This is not my seat. My seat's over there, but it was a convenient chair, convenient microphone.
Sure, you just take over the big guy's seat right off.
Right, I know. I'm sure he's seething right now. That's why I wanted to say that. So it is a good question. It's a great question. And so I wish to highlight just a few things perhaps for discussion, and that is related to the programmatic EIR. Again, that's a higher level CEQA document that is meant to cover the entire program, to recognize where environmental effects occur within the program structure itself. How this works on the road or on the ground, though, is that each individual applicant, again, fills out a checklist, and that checklist is designed so that each individual license is recognizing their own effects on the landscape and then applying appropriate mitigations to that. So if it's a question of a community, well, that's something that is likely more like a neighborhood. It's more appropriate for the ordinance itself to really say where on the ground can cannabis occur. Because the program EIR couldn't say that. It says that it's occurring all over the place. We don't know exactly where it's going to occur. Well, in the individual checklist, each individual is having to tell us where it's occurring on the landscape, on the ground, in a neighborhood or not in a neighborhood, and then apply the appropriate mitigations to that individual location. If that location is in a neighborhood of other cannabis operations, well, then that gets to a section of the checklist that is intended and designed to call that out and to define that and describe that. The idea of cumulative impacts, the idea of whether those are considerable or not. That checklist, and anyone filling out a checklist will have to address that question specifically. However, when those mitigations are implemented, they're implemented to bring a potential environmental impact to a level of less than significance. So less than significance, it's the idea of what is significant and what is less than significant. Does that mean it can still be a bother to your neighbor? It can be a nuisance? Well, we have nuisance laws that are intended to address nuisances, but if it's a bother to somebody, I'm not sure that's the best word, but it's what I'm using now. Well, this doesn't really get there. So that idea of it bothering a neighborhood may not be environmentally significant, but it's bothering them, then that's something that this structure doesn't have the teeth to address. That is something I would argue for the supervisors to address in terms of where cannabis belongs in our community and in our landscape overall. You could address it through opt-out potential, opt-outs of certain neighborhoods or areas. You could address it any number of ways of where you wish cannabis to occur on the landscape. However, for this process here, we are doing this because we are trying to enforce the mitigations that we recognized and we adopted. So we are doing, I would argue, everything we can within our structure to minimize, to a degree of less than significance, environmental impacts.
Other questions from the board?
No, that was, I do have a question, but that was one of the main questions I think probably most of us got, at least I got the same question that Jeremy seemed to get a lot. And I get your answer, which is very, very good, except for the bother part, which we do need to address somehow and quantify bother over nuisance. And I think that is going to be a reoccurring kind of problem. That middle ground there, and if the board isn't going to need to put the teeth into that language, then we should start thinking about that, because I think it is going to be something that will be meddlesome for us in the future. And it also is something that was part of the transition plan, and as we all know, not everything is perfect in a transition plan, and we are adaptive at it. And I think this is the time we start making some movements and adapting, that part of it. I'm sure down the road we'll find more places to reiterate, some of the steps as we go down the road. But I think this is one that we need to, one of the first ones that we need to have concerns with and talk about and get that to be addressed in the best way possible.
So I recognize perhaps that was more of a comment than a specific question. I do wish to highlight that I'm breaking my own rule perhaps, but that these conversations have occurred over a number of years, of course. And this is with a resolution that was adopted, I believe, in 2017, if I'm not wrong, perhaps 16, with a presentation received by the board in December of 2020 in terms of the idea of ways to move forward in ordinance changes. Even in the EIR, in one section, chapter 2 of volume 1, I believe, was speaking to the idea of these are ways that you can change this ordinance. We were tasked and we worked forward with what we had at the moment, and I encouraged the idea of really drilling down and addressing how the ordinance itself can functionally be changed or clarified to address the concerns of your constituents.
Well, that will be in the general plan, likely feel that.
No. No, a general plan is general. It might have some policies in place for moving forward, but usually general plans are not that specific or speak to a specific program that much.
It would be included though in the zoning.
The zoning
ordinance
implements.
after that would implement
Correct.
the general plan, your overall philosophy, then the zoning ordinance would be the carrying out of that. But I do want to tell Liam that this is part of what the ad hoc is working on, our wagon wheel approach of trying to set up a format of how do we start changing and revising and fixing the ordinance where we have the obvious fixes that we need to do. And but the first, what we're focusing on and trying to get done is set up the procedure for that to start and who can start it, not necessarily, we have a list of past, going way 4 or 5 years of past dream fixes.
Sure.
But the most important part is to set up the consultant to process how this gets moving, and that's what we're working on now.
Right, and exactly, and to add on to that, again, want to emphasize that changes in the ordinance and the land use issues, that is not, the transition plan is not the appropriate document for that. It's just for the implementation process of the CEQA.
To reiterate and clarify, thank you, Director Hunter, absolutely. This is related to some comments I have heard or seen, is that this transition plan is in no way changing the existing ordinance. It is in no way allowing for an individual operation license holder to not implement a mitigation. It is the county's responsibility to implement all mitigations in an appropriate and reasonable way. But they must be implemented. And that is what this plan is trying to do.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I've heard that many times, and Derek's reiterated it. I think we have here too. I have another question for someone gave me, and it is, can the county use the compliance determination to justify an NOD under the program EIR?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
could you repeat that?
Can the county use the compliance determination to justify a notice of determination under the program EIR?
It's kind of apples and oranges there. Can the county use a notice of determination?
Mm-hmm.
The compliance determination. The question was, can you use a compliance determination to get to a notice of determination?
Yeah, no, that's for a full CEQA document.
Okay.
And because we have the EIR, in fact, we're going above and beyond with noticing. Actually, CEQA does not require noticing. That is something that we're doing for transparency and part of the settlement agreement with TAA.
Sure.
So we're going above and beyond. Usually it's just, you make findings and note to a file that this is in compliance with your EIR, whatever action, whatever EIR you're dealing with on a program basis. And that's a note to the file. So it's a different process because we have the EIR. It does not have to go through the Planning Commission for a full-on notice of determination. It's not your regular Appendix G, the CEQA guidelines for a development project like a conditional use permit. So could it happen? Notices of determination are very precise. The CEQA is very precise. So you're trying to take something and apply it to something that's unnecessary.
I could interject there. I do see a crossover, and I'm not trying to contradict.
No, I think they're very closely related, the concept, but the actual notice of determination is based on CEQA law for another action.
Correct.
You're still, in both cases, saying, yes, it's in compliance with that document. The mitigations are being applied.
Correct.
So that's kind of a CEQA question because we're doing something we don't even, we're doing compliance determination, we're noticing and doing these things that's above and beyond what's really required by law, to try to take something else and make it, push it into that, that square peg into that round hole, or however that saying goes.
Either way.
That I personally, with my experience, and David might disagree, but this is where we've had fun. We kind of go back and forth on these things. No, I don't think it would be appropriate because it's saying that this has been approved by a planning commission or this has been approved by the approving body, and then there's a process. So in my case, I don't think it would, but there is crossover.
And that's fair. I do not wish to muddy the waters at all by getting into sort of a CEQA process concern. However, I will say that in part of the drafting of the EIR, the programmatic EIR, and its certification, there was a recognition of something you could call, in terms and language, a safety valve. And that is if anyone had a checklist, they went through their checklist, and while they're going through it, they identify they have some unusual circumstances that the programmatic EIR never addressed, then they would need to address those for their individual operation. The EIR attempted to really, look at everything across the board and imagine or conceive of any potential impacts. That's why some of those mitigations are pretty, they were unusual themselves, such as if you're finding dinosaur bones on your property, you've got to do something about that. So it took a pretty wide approach in terms of what it was trying to look at in terms of environmental impacts. But it's conceivable that an individual operation, as they're going through their checklist and their own individual environmental review, that they're going to identify and have to speak to something that the EIR did not speak to. At that point, there is a crossover of the potential that they could need to go to a route for a notice of determination for a mitigated negative declaration. So that process, the point is it's hopefully unusual. But
in that case, they're doing a focused initial study
Yes.
on that one issue, and that's going to the Planning Commission.
That's
So
right.
that is following the full CEQA guidelines. If it falls in the parameters of the PEIR, the programmatic EIR, and those can be implemented, and they can work with the Appendix C checklist and show compliance, and we recognize that, then it would be a compliance determination.
Absolutely. So I don't intend this to be a debate. It's not a debate.
No.
Director Hunter and I are in agreement, but it's just
Absolutely.
understanding that it's a complicated field out there, but there's recognition of the potential need for a second-tier document for focused analysis that would tier off of the EIR. That wasn't exactly your question, but I think that was a component of it.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, a notice of determination was filed for the environmental impact report.
Sure.
Okay.
Just trying to get the whole works in there before we have to circle back around and kick it again. Thank you though, thank both of you.
So can a compliance determination be appealed every year? Like upon renewal?
Right now, we have annual licenses, and that's another good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah. What do you think?
Okay, what do I think? Okay. The idea of going through the checklist to receive a compliance determination is functionally or structurally set up as a one-time deal. You only have to go through that checklist once, which I recognize is difficult, say, at the moment for individual operations to navigate and negotiate the checklist itself and what is required and expected of their responses and their information. But it's meant to be hard. It's meant to be, this is what you have to do. These are the mitigations and the analyses that you have to conduct to prove your case, to make your argument that your operation is not impacting the environment. So in that regard, yes, you do that once. We're not expecting people to do the checklist every year. We're not expecting them to analyze or reanalyze. All of that is built around the idea that your project remains the same, that your operation doesn't change. So if you are set up, you have what you want to be doing, or you know exactly what your build out is going to be, you only have to do that checklist at one point. However, Director Hunter's right is that we, in our current ordinance, have annual licenses. So the license itself will have to be reissued or renewed every year. But it would be based off of the information that had already been provided. It would be based off of the annual inspections that are occurring, not only with our code compliance personnel, but also state compliance in terms of all the different permits that are required, Fish and Wildlife, Water Board, DCC. All that information that is compiled by those inspections become part of the record and become part of the documentation that you are continuing your operation as you initially described. So, is that clear?
It sounds like a yes. Is that right?
Well, it's a yes to annual licensing, but it's a no to annually receiving a compliance determination.
Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I have a couple. So I heard your question as being, can it be appealed every year? So that would be a no, right?
Okay, great, thank you for that.
The license is noticed every year, and that can be appealed.
Oh, it was, yes.
Because the license is
License
actually
can be appealed, but
the
not the,
action.
not the environmental document.
Got it.
Not the compliance.
Okay. I get that. Okay, so just a couple of questions that have come my direction. Some of them, it seems like, I don't know if I just didn't realize it or if they didn't realize it either, but I have some like really lengthy in-depth things that have come from consultants. So they should just send that right straight to you, and that will be part of this continuing process of you helping them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And to clarify, not to me specifically. This is sent to the Cannabis Division, and that is still a structure that remains in the Planning Department.
Okay.
So I'm happy to advise and engage where I can, but to make sure that there's a documentation of what is received, then that should go to the Planning Department.
Okay.
And to follow up on that, for those on the line who want to submit comments, the email to send those comments to is info.cannabis@trinitycounty.org, and that's on the cannabis website as well. But that's the best email to use when sending comments.
When you make your next change, it's really hard. When you make your next change, could we have red line comments so that we can see what was different about before and after? Is that hard or just an easy request?
Yeah, that can be very difficult. We did we not include the track changes?
I don't believe so.
Originally, the track changes copy was included. I think that might have somehow fell off because it was only that one item. So by red line, do you mean a track change copy?
I believe I do.
Okay.
The one where you can see what got changed.
Unfortunately, there's been so many changes from our team on the document, it's hard to read, but I'd be happy to provide that. We could get that up on the website as well.
I think I don't know if it's necessary to go back, but maybe when you just make changes
Okay,
from this point forward, I'm not asking you to go back and
Yeah,
redo something.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it accidentally got dropped off. And we had I think somebody mentioned Friday was kind of a hectic day. I was heading out of town Thursday, so we did some changes real quick, and I think it got left off. So in the future, I'll make sure to have that with that as well.
And then will comments that come in be formally responded to? Perhaps is that maybe how FAQs get developed?
We weren't envisioning that. That does take a lot of staff time. I will not be here, so there's a question of who's going to be making those changes. David has a lot on his plate right now, so I can't speak to that. But that takes a lot of work to respond individually to comments. So I'm not sure at this point what the direction will be from the ad hoc or who will be in that position making those changes.
So let me ask you 2 questions. The first one is, do you think that would be like, if the world were perfect with plenty of staff, would that be something that would be valuable?
Responding individually to comments?
And not that they would, I mean, many are going to be similar, or using that as perhaps a resource to create FAQs.
That's a great idea. That'd probably be the best form it could take, is just responding to those comments in the FAQs.
So I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but do you just need help? In other words, if I volunteered to help you, is that something that's doable, or is that inappropriate from my position?
It's probably not the best route.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that, yes, I like the idea of FAQs, absolutely. That is something that we have discussed. It's been on the plate for a number of years. We used to have FAQs, so I see that as an appropriate outlet for the idea of comments to the specific transition plan. Yes, it is a question of staffing. Director Hunter's right, it does take quite a bit of time. But if there's any report out from the department, it would be that we are looking to staff up to get personnel that could address something in as responsive a way as you're suggesting.
Sure. So my thought was just to bring greater clarity more quickly, and probably somebody's comments are very similar to somebody else's, and maybe that helps to just bring the understanding. This is so helpful. Sitting here just having these conversations is so helpful to me, and so that's what I was thinking in terms of.
We've got some really great questions today.
If I could speak to, in the past with the division, cannabis division, FAQs have been produced, but it didn't always seem like they were digested very easily. And that's not I don't mean that in a negative way. Sometimes they're difficult to get through FAQ type document. However, I see that they have a lot of value. So if you'll notice, even in the transition plan, it was a notion of what else can we do in order to get information out to the public and to address specific questions. And there's a number of different formats that we can do that. We have discussed even our consultants that we have right now with Helix and Lego Associates to ask them to be putting together some documentation that can more swiftly and directly address individual questions, whether they be frequent or not. Templates, forms, even videos is a notion, although I don't know, I discussed that with them. So just please understand that idea of how best to get this information out is something of concern, absolutely. Of interest of ours, I should say.
Okay. Next question was to do with the appeal process, where we are saying that we have an administrative appeal process. But if the chairman of the board signs those licenses, do we at the board level interrupt that, or in essence kind of remove that option from the public where you're left at the board level with the possibility of a 2-2 split? Is there another option instead of that one? And I know, David, we had this conversation a little bit, but we weren't able to get into like what are those possibilities, or why would they be less advantageous?
Council, I think the question, and stop me when I am totally wrong, but the question is, if the chair signs it, does he then have to recuse off of later things? Is there an implication that he is now biased in the process? Is that close to what you're asking?
Yeah.
So that question has been raised. We did seek an opinion from outside counsel as well to look at that, and the opinion came back as no, that wouldn't be a conflict. I would like to research it more just to make sure we have it done correctly. I don't necessarily disagree with outside counsel. I think they're correct. I just like to have the case law to back it up. So that will be done.
Okay. And then I've got a question that came on the mitigations, failed mitigations. It's on page 15, 3.3. So am I understanding it correctly that some mitigations just can't, by nature of what they are, be handled in an expedited manner? So you may need to proceed with your operation before that mitigation is actually taken care of. But that over the course of that license duration, it does need to be handled. If it isn't, and since we have one-year licenses, would it be correct then to say if it wasn't handled by the end of that 1 year, that license wouldn't be renewed for the following year until that mitigation was handled?
So there's mitigations that are effective, that are ongoing. There's mitigations that maybe take a little bit of time, and then there's those mitigations. And one of our best examples of one of the longer term over time mitigations is, say you need a vegetative screen, and that's going to take time to grow. So the concept is that it's in progress and we need a plan. So when we receive the Appendix C document, and if there are mitigations that apply, there needs to be a mitigation plan on how that will be implemented with benchmarks. So it's underway. And that is part of the Appendix C package that is reviewed. If a mitigation applies to you, that's going to take some time to implement. When is it going to happen? What is it going to happen? And when are those benchmarks for that certain mitigation? Is it a year? Are we going to look at this in a year when we go out for inspection? What is that going to be, and where do you expect to be by that year? And if that benchmark is not met, then there is language in the transition plan where there's possible revocation and repercussions for that not being underway and not meeting what we call the letter of intent, really, of how that will be done, and along with the mitigation plan. So that is how those that are going to take time will be monitored. Very similar to other projects, they'll have a mitigation and monitoring plan with them, and that's just kind of lays out how these will actually happen over time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with that. I don't have too much to add, but I can speak to, say, what I envision as far as that goes, or what that is worth. But the idea of a mitigation that needs to be implemented over time, say the screening, vegetative screening, are those plants still alive the next year? Are they being watered? Are they being taken care of so that it's actually a functional implementation of that mitigation? I see that as a component of our compliance inspections, so that if, say, for example, a particular operation highlights the dozen mitigations that they need to implement because of their site-specific conditions, and say, vegetation is one of them, screening is one of them, well, our compliance personnel would have those mitigations in front of them. They would know what they need to be looking for when they're conducting an inspection, and include those factors into their on-the-ground inspection of the site to, again, assure that the county's responsibility to implement these mitigations is actually happening. You're correct in pointing out that, yes, these are annual licenses, yet it may take 5 years for those plants to grow. However, if you're going to be in the program, those plants need to be growing. That vegetative screen needs to be meeting the mitigation requirements.
Okay. I guess the last thing I just would request, I felt like it was really great to have a letter from Derek responding, the memo that was addressed to you and shared with all of us. Could he put in writing how comfortable he feels with all of the rest of this entire plan? Just, I guess, to dot all the T's and cross, I did that backward. Dot all the I's and cross all the T's. It seems simple. Is that an easy request?
If I could jump in there, I would consider that direction from the board, which of course is a component of this agenda item that we're discussing right now. So I would, for my part, be happy to receive direction from the board, but I would like it to be in the same model, perhaps, that is one of real concise and, or I can defer to council about really the best way for that to happen. But I hear that as direction from the board.
Yes, personally, I feel that this letter that he wrote is adequate in addressing the issues that were raised as being worrisome. And I think that's appropriate.
So I'm not speaking just to those issues that were raised. I'm looking at the document as a whole and just saying, to me, it would be a comfort factor for him to kind of put that written stamp of approval on the whole thing as he did with these questions. Meaning other questions could come along too, and it would kind of cover them all together.
I think it's hard to speculate what all those questions would be, so it's easier for him to answer those questions as they come forward. Because otherwise you could go down as many tangents and what ifs, because those exist.
So I guess I would chip in and say, I think most of the questions probably come from Dan and Keith with the ad hoc. Frequently asked questions here, probably interfacing the most with the public. I'm sure you guys have received some questions about things already. Would it be fair for them to communicate those questions to us and then kind of us disseminate that?
So I'm not really speaking to individual questions. I'm just speaking to the document as a whole. I believe that 2 weeks ago it was stated that council felt very comfortable with the document, and I was just wondering if that could be put into writing.
I think that would be a costly request. I'd be charged hourly, yeah.
And I think that it was approved by county council as to form and content. To me, that's a stamp of approval from council. Like, that is in writing that council approves it.
Okay.
Jill, I think it would be more appropriate in a situation in a closed session with an advising attorney to ask that question. And I think it would be fair enough to have, if we're looking at not the transition plan, but as contained in, since the transition plan is in some sort of legal limbo, to have that question asked in closed. Margaret, would that be an appropriate place to ask that, since this is, I know the transition is open, but the legal advice that we're getting on this is confidential.
So that's correct. If you'd like to have a conference with your legal counsel in closed session to ask any questions that potentially relate to an opinion on opening this up for litigation or anything of that nature, we can set that up.
Okay, so to be clear, that request might have been something that was appropriate prior to litigation having been filed, or not really at all?
It can be before, during, or after. So if it commences regarding litigation, there's a number of reasons you can go into closed session to talk to counsel, some of them being based on litigation. So again, if there's these issues are being litigated, or there's a claim in court that it's not being done correctly, it would be appropriate to seek legal advice in closed session from your outside counsel, and we can set that up.
Okay, but I just was referring to my question in general. I'm trying to learn something from the process. If litigation had not been filed against this document, would it have been appropriate for me to ask in closed session, hey, could we just really have that confirmation that we got 2 weeks ago verbally? I was just asking for that in writing. And so you're saying that even then, that wouldn't have been appropriate, or because the litigation was filed, it becomes a bit inappropriate?
It's irrelevant. The litigation doesn't make a difference in this matter. It's attorney-client privilege that makes the matter. So it makes a difference. So any information or direction that's provided to you through counsel is protected. It's not public because, again, you have to be able to make decisions based on that related to litigation, related to other matters. So if you are to request a legal opinion, that can be provided to you. That will not be public. If you'd like that legal opinion to be public, we do what we did today, which is the board will waive that attorney-client privilege. And then that can be made public, such as the memo was done today. So that's the procedure to get that opinion.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the end of my questions.
All right, well, unless there's any other questions
Yeah, I have
from the
a couple
board.
more. Sorry.
Come on, Keith, you're pulling the Liam over there.
I'm working on it. Yeah, just one more thing. So when you issue the license, it's after the 10-day appeal period, correct?
Correct.
Right, so it's not past the time, it's not official until it's past the time that somebody has the ability to appeal. Okay. And then I'm a little confused. This goes back to our previous discussion. So we have the 308 licenses, and then we have the new licenses, roughly. We don't have to go to 305, whatever the number is. So do the new licenses have to get an NOD?
The new licenses do not have to get a NOD. They may, if they can show they fall into the Appendix C parameters, meaning that they can show their issues are recognized and identified by the EIR, by the program EIR, and that they can do the Appendix C document. Now, the new licenses, because they're a later baseline, basically, they will be, it will be more likely they may have to do a notice of determination, go through the full process to do an initial study. Due to cumulative impacts, their new sites, they're doing new disturbance, something may come up. That's my fill on it. David can also speak to this matter, of course, and may have a different view. But as we get farther in the program, and especially those sites that are brand new breaking ground sites, you're going to have more issues with those sites, more mitigations that apply. The sites that have been in the program the longest, that have changes, that were, previously cultivated, in most cases, they're going to have the least amount of mitigations that apply. And it comes down to this baseline concept as well.
I would echo what Director Hunter said, that in terms of new licenses, I would stress that the EIR in many ways was built around the idea of new land disturbance. So there's many mitigations that will apply to that concept specifically, or that reality on the ground. So there's quite a few mitigations. At one point we did put together basically a list or a breakdown of all the mitigations that are, say, specific to existing operations, that are specific to new operations, or that are even specific to non-cultivation license types. So we have done that in the past, but I just wish to stress now for this particular question, yes, a new license that has the potential to be entirely new in terms of land disturbance, or as Director Hunter mentioned, where it is located, the siting consideration of where that operation is on the landscape in relation to other licensed operations. Yes, those can be, perhaps more difficult to get through in terms of the amount of documentation that we're requesting.
So sometimes people shoot themselves in the foot by just trying to get by and get by and get by, where it's easier in the long run to just get a CUP off the bat, basically. So that's basically, this is what an NOD would be, correct? So, not on a big spectrum, not being technical. So, would it be wise to advise people to really closely think about that maybe going through the whole process in front of a commission might be easier in the long run than not?
Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of the EIR, is my first thought. I mean, the streamlining process. And then my next thought is, it's very likely several of, a good number of the licenses will end up in front of the Planning Commission. Then it might be a focused initial study on one issue. And then lastly, that's well, I'm kind of coming back to the first thought. It's what we wanted to avoid, having the EIR in the streamlining process. Could they do it? Yeah, if they really wanted to. There's nothing stopping them from submitting a full initial study. In that case, they have to pay Fish and Wildlife fees once we file the notice of germination, which is over $2,000. I mean, CEQA's a tedious process. So, but if they feel that's going to be the way they're going to end up anyway, then, but it's hard for them to make that. It's hard for most people to make that determination. So, nothing's barring them from filing an initial study and asking for it to go to the Planning Commission.
I guess maybe I'm just thinking that if somebody would have done their CEQA, started that process 3 years ago, they'd be good to go and not be still quagmired in this.
Five people did that, I believe.
Well, and those 5 people
Are the licenses?
have licenses today.
Yeah.
So I would just add to that anything that happens now must speak to our ordinance and must speak to the EIR. So those in any subsequent CUP or any sort of environmental document for any cannabis operation, they have to include what we've already done. So whether we make it easier for them or they want to go that route, okay. I'm not sure exactly how that decision would be made or how that would play out, but I just want to stress that our rules, our regulations, our ordinance is what we are doing.
Maybe I'm getting too far into the weeds, so I apologize. All right, with that, I'm done.
All right, we will open it up for public comment. Going once, going twice, and done. Okay.
We have none in the room. I have no comments. And oh, there we go. Veronica Kelly Albies.
All right, good afternoon. I'm not sure what time it is. Oh, it's still morning. Good morning. This is Veronica Kelly Albies, Douglas City. I would like to start by thanking staff for providing more content within the transition plan. The additional information provided some better insight to how the department would like to use the PEIR to run the cannabis program. The streamlining strategies offer a path of least resistance for industry use while having what may be a fatal flaw of becoming just a paper drill instead of a CEQA review and creating a barrier for public participation or input. With the TAA and several current cannabis industry entity lawsuits involving the county, we can't afford to streamline the PEIR to the least of its abilities and protections. I had spent copious amounts of time trying to research what the state defines as compliance determination, so today's information was very helpful to find out that it is something that has sort of been created to get to a CEQA determination, although that's not really a word that's being used right now. The process submitted under the transition plan for tearing off of the PEIR for subsequent or later activity could provide a path for abuse of the system if there is a lack of oversight or physical inspection by county staff. One of the most significant issues is that the county will not be completing the checklist. It does state one time on page 6 that the county will then review the application and conduct a site inspection to verify accuracy and applicability. Then that phrase and commitment disappears. There is no further mention of site inspection when the process is laid out, such as in figure 2.2. Will county staff be doing a physical site inspection or will the hired consultants? Does the county have its own internal checklist to verify they are completing their process requirements? How can the public confirm a physical site inspection was completed in the CEQA process? It does state that sites that have been previously issued a CE must complete a checklist. Will they also receive a physical site inspection? These are details that should be added to this plan to provide clear direction. The phrase subsequent and later activities and the examples given in the transition plan seem to indicate that larger commercial cannabis projects may have the ability to utilize an addendum process off of the PEIR, which is described as basically a way to avoid allowing a broad base of public input. The county staffing shortages within the cannabis department have created some shortcuts, which allows the ability for the county to administer the appropriate oversight if the transition plan is not in place and there is no current light at the end of the tunnel. When an addendum is being processed, who will review the public input? The county, the consultant, who will make a determination on whether the input is relevant? Who will review that? And what if that information never reaches the appropriate ears? And everything goes to final, as you guys were saying, after the 10 days, the only way to get a public input meeting is to pay $500. How many times have we seen the public come before you and provide concrete evidence that something is happening because of something that was missed by staff? The county has the discretion to allow public notice, input, and hearings. It might be worth adding that in and allowing the public to participate in this process a little more. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Next public comment.
Patrick Kahn.
Hey, this is Patrick Kahn from Jeremy Brown's district. And I was just listening to Keith's last comments about, some of it I understood, but about going through his CUP right off the bat. So that was my thought 3.5 years ago, Keith, and that's why I am here now. I have all my documents in hand to finalize the CUP. It's taken 3+ years because a lot of documents changed that were necessary, such as the biological assessment and others. So I guess my question is now that I've finally completed mine and all my resources have gone into doing a CUP, and now I'm operating under a different license, which also requires me to renew to get the C completed. And I'm just really curious, how is that gonna happen? Because my CUP is supposed to be hired out to a consultant, and I'm not aware that that consultant is still on staff, is still processing my document. So how are we gonna get through this together? Because I'd love to bring my project to fruition. It's been a long time and we've finally gotten all the documents, but do I go and do the C first, which would mean pivoting a bunch of consultants who have just finished the CUP over the last 3 years? Or do I have to do both? And it's becoming really unclear with Director Hunter leaving and knowing that the engineer, knowing that SHN has had it on their plate. So I'm just wondering, you know, sort of an order of reviewing people's licenses and renewals. And some of that hasn't been really clear to me. So anyway, I hope you can find my question in there, but it's kind of a suit of I really wanted to meet the finish line, which is kind of what has been presented as, you know, today's presentation. It's how to get there. And so any advice or clarity that you guys can give, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Next public comment.
I have no chats and no raised hands.
All right, with that, we will bring it back to the board.
Can we have somebody from staff contact Patrick and come up with a plan on that? Unless Patrick.
Yes, and so to follow up on Patrick's question, at the point he is getting close to getting his initial study finished, it kind of comes to a timing question. And it probably would be advantageous to have more direction on the plan. And then it basically says if you're doing a CUP, you don't need to do Appendix C, but then where does that fall? If you're a ways from getting your conditional use permit issued, then it might be the best move to move forward with the Appendix C. Knowing where Patrick is in the process, in his situation, it'd be better to just finish that initial study and get it to the Planning Commission. Instead of change route and go Appendix C document. So hopefully he's still listening, but I will provide more information. There's a few people in that position who are asking that question, so I felt it's good information just to mention. And another comment, the first comment we received, we are making a CEQA determination. And that determination is, if it's an Appendix C document, that CEQA determination is that project is in compliance with our ordinance and the EIR. So again, it's a little bit confusing. It's a complicated process, but a CEQA determination is being issued on every license. We're going through this to make sure every site is CEQA compliant with a determination. So just wanted to clarify that as well. Thanks.
So my understanding is we're doing the 2 weeks for people to contact, and then 2 weeks after that, after staff, whoever digests that, you'll come back to the board for your final draft, or this year's final draft, and we'll approve it or not approve it, or give direction. Is that correct with the process at this point?
Yes, that's correct.
Everybody good with that?
David's thinking this out.
Sorry, I don't mean to add my personal thoughts to the conversation too much here, but just to clarify is that the resolution that was passed on October 19th was one where it was adopted as is, but with the contingent of bringing it back to the meeting that we're currently in. That resolution is still in effect, so the transition plan is still operable. So any subsequent action after the comment period ends or the next meeting occurs, well, we're addressing the comment period. Or the comments that are made. I guess that could use some clarification in my mind, just in terms of what the board would like to see in terms of any response to comments at that subsequent board meeting, the next board meeting, I believe. That's my request. Just so that it's clear, and maybe I'm muddling this a little bit, but I see some furrowed eyebrows around. So that's my request. It's like, what is it that you really wish to see at the next board meeting?
I'll say what my thought was, and so when it will be at the next board meeting per se, that board meeting needs to be determined, but it will be a revised plan, incorporating comments, an improved, better plan, and if there are types of questions, often when you receive questions on a CEQA document, you get a lot of similar types of questions. So maybe it'd be helpful for those most commonly asked questions to have those summarized in the staff report and addressed, and even noted where those were addressed in the plan and the changes. That is what I was thinking. So.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Again, just with the change of roles here, I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what the expectation is. But again, to highlight that there isn't a decision point specifically at that next meeting to be determined.
There is a decision to adopt the revised.
There is, okay.
The updated plan, absolutely.
Understood. All right, thank you.
And
but that's in my mind, and you guys can do whatever you want.
that's what's in my mind. But to make it clear, the transition plan that we have and adopted is still moving forward.
Sure.
And people are still moving with that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I will take one brief moment, if I may. The idea of being in front of you now is very valuable, I believe, both for staff as well as supervisors and your constituents. I want to echo a comment made by Supervisor Cox in terms of our ability to sit here and answer questions for you. I appreciate that opportunity. I want to highlight that because this came to you in the resolution form, that is one reason that we're able to do it in in the public eye. So while this could be considered an internal sort of administrative, rule book that we have that we could just work on, instead we're doing this in a way that is intended to be transparent in terms of one of the guiding goals of the transition plan itself. So, to highlight and perhaps some comments that I've heard in respect to why are we even talking about this? Well, the value is, I believe, not just the sound of my own voice, but the idea that we can kind of discuss and debate and hash out some of these concerns to the benefit of the public. So, thank you.
I would agree. I think it's a great way to start. The transparency, we get more questions out of more questions, and we try to come up with the best we can. So I'm happy with the way it's going.
I do it just because I like the sound of his voice.
I thought we were going to have a movie today.
Sorry.
So are there any revisions or specific direction that would like be conveyed to staff from the board? Going once, going twice?
Hang on 1 second. Sorry. Kim, all that good clarity that you gave us on notice of determination is over here, that's not necessary because we have the EIR, but now we have the certificate of, did I say it right? Certificate of compliance?
Determination.
Determination.
It had many names.
It has clarity in my head the way that I've mapped it out on my notes. And now I'm trying to say it. So maybe I'm messing it up a little bit. Is there value in kind of trying to say that into the document in a way that somebody could read that and go, oh yeah, that's what she meant?
Yeah, I'm seeing a flow chart with the different, I'm seeing a figure,
Okay.
a visual in my mind with some narrative, but I think that's something you need to see. This, route A, route B, in the end, you get a CEQA determination.
And nice to have it captured so that you can revisit it. It's one thing if I feel like, and other people may feel the same way, like, oh yeah, I understand it here, I walk away for an hour and I'm like,
What was that again? Yeah, no, I definitely, a visual, CEQA, again, is so complicated, and to break it down when you're trying to read a narrative, to have something you can see, like I said, a flow chart or something would be extremely helpful in this situation.
so is that considered correction? No.
I think we're good.
I think we're good. I want to thank David for being here and giving us the clarity in some of these answers, and Kim, that we're going to need to work through for a while, I think, coming up. So I think it's productive.
Yeah.
I think this works.
I really appreciate you guys' time fielding those questions on the spot. I know it's not always easy, and it's so dynamic, and all these different realms that they all come from. So it is really nice to be able to put them directly into your laps and listen.
You guys had some excellent questions today, and your constituents channeled through you, so we appreciate that, because sometimes there's a lot to think about when you're putting these documents together. And so, great questions.
So with that being said, I guess we would say I don't expect an answer immediately. There may be a complex question that comes up that we all need to think about for some time. I hope not, but I'm sure it will. So I think anytime we leave the council can help us here and we need to think through it, we should take that time.
All right. And that, do I need to do anything formal to close this item out? Margaret?
No, not
Okay.
at the time.
All right, then when we are done with item 4.7, that closes out our public meeting. We're going to go into closed session. Item 5.1, Government Code Section 54954.5C, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, number of cases 1, Sabaya Family Farms LLC, and Mark Dos Santos, First County of Trinity, Trinity County Superior Court case number 21, CB 144, no fiscal impact. Is there any public comment on this item?
I see none in the room, no new chats, and no raised hands.
All right, thank you everybody for joining us today for the board meeting. It is adjourned.
John Bauer said.
He was on there.
Was he?
Wow.
He didn't speak on it.